Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Barry Landau here, saying welcome to all of the attendees of the 3rd Malaysian Bromeliad Fair, online virtual reality Bromeliad Fair for 2021, sponsored by the Malaysian Bromeliad Society. And I couldn't be here live in person on the Facebook live stream, but I am here in a video to tell you a little bit about my history with bromeliads and my very successful planet groups on Facebook. Well, for me, it started all back in 1967. I got my first bromeliad when I was 8 years old from my grandfather, who collected cactus and succulents just in a small way. He never paid for anything. He just traded cuttings with friends. But one point, he gave me this funny looking, about this tall, 12, 14-inch tall, green tubular plant. And said, just make sure you water it once every 2 weeks or so. So I took it home and put it in another pot. And sure enough, within 6 months, it bloomed. This very plain, green-looking plant bloomed this beautiful spike that curved over with these very colorful flowers. And I didn't think about it much. And then about the middle of next summer, my family and I, we went on a vacation, driving vacation around America to go see the Grand Canyon and such. We were gone for 6 weeks. There's nobody to water the plants. Of course, I didn't think about the cactus or succulents, but I was worried about this funny-looking green plant. When I got home, it was just fine. Now it's the middle of August. What I discovered is you couldn't kill the damn thing. I mean, unless you tried. So I looked it up. I went to the library and I looked up, what is this thing? And I found out it was a bromeliad. And I further found out it was called Bilbergia nutans. The common name was Queen's Tears. Anyways, I went on slowly collecting what I could, and I got very dedicated with plants of all kinds. And I was already, by age 11, in 1970, I was working at a nursery. Well, it was a plant shop. In those days, this was the first plant shop. There weren't any plant shops. There were only nurseries. And this was kind of a hip situation on Melrose Boulevard where the decorators were. And talked my way in for $1 an hour. And I worked harder than any of the adults. This is after school and on weekends. And concurrently with that, I was going to school in Hollywood at Bancroft Junior High, and walking home one day from Bancroft to go to the bus, I spotted a house that had a bunch of bromeliads out front. And they were very different looking, big bromeliads. I didn't know what they were. And I walked over to the driveway and I looked over the fence, tall fence, and down this driveway, it was unbelievable. It was like Costa Rica in a bottle. There were bromeliads and orchids and generiads and ripsalis and cycads, you name it. So I knocked on the door, nobody was home. Anyways, a week later, I'm working at the plant shop. It's called Mother Earth. Mother Earth plant shop. It was a very famous high-end plant shop. And up pulls a guy in an old 1958. It was a New Yorker station wagon, which was just should have been a nothing car, but he pulls up and I can tell this is some kind of hopped up hot rod, but it doesn't look like it. Anyways, the guy gets out, and it's an older man in overalls with a French hat on, a beret, and he goes back of the car and opens the station wagon back. And he starts putting boxes on the curb full of bromeliads. Now, by that time, I had started reading enough books in the library in West Hollywood, and I had found Exotica, which was a 5-inch thick book by a gentleman named Dr. Graff, who was the author of the book. And so I knew enough to know that there were many genera, different genuses of bromeliads. Anyways, so I was sweeping up the sidewalk. I went up to him and I said, "Sir, do you need help with these boxes?" And he says to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Barry Landau. I work here at the nursery after school. And I saw that you have these amazing bromeliads, and I decided to help you carry them in." And he says, "Well, okay, that's okay with me." And I said, "I've never seen these incredible species of bromeliads anywhere live. That's an incredible Neregelia, and I see you have a Queensnelia there." And this older man, had to be 63 or 64, something like that, looks at me like I had gut punched him. And he goes, "You know the names?" He had a very thick accent. I said, "Well, yes, sir, I've been reading up on these things, but there's nowhere to buy them. There's nowhere to get them." He said, "Let me take care of my business and we'll talk afterwards." So I helped him carry the boxes in, went back to my sweeping and my watering the front of the front area of the plant shop. And he comes out counting a wad of 20s. I mean, he had delivered like eight boxes. It was a full load in his New Yorker station wagon. And I was astonished. And I didn't say anything about the money, but I said to him, "I'd like to learn more about these plants." He says, "Yeah, I talked to Joe in there, the manager. He says, you're the best employee they have, even over the adults." He says, "Here's my address," on a little piece of paper. He says, "Come next Saturday morning, 8 o'clock on time, and I'll teach you a little something about bromeliads." I said, "Well, that's amazing. Thank you, sir." He says, "Yeah, call me Frenchie." I said, "Thank you. Should I call before I come?" He says, "No, just come, 8 o'clock Saturday morning." All right, push comes to shove. I go home, I tell my mother about this. She's like, "You want to go to a strange guy's house? You don't know him? 8 in the morning?" She says, "I'm going to come with you and make sure everything's okay, that he's not an axe murderer." So we go over 8 in the morning, and he greets my mother, and he's got this European class, this European charm, and he kisses her on the hand, and my mother swoons. Anyways, she sees that he's got an elderly sick wife, that he's not an axe murderer, and that he has this huge collection of bromeliads. She says, "Okay, call me an hour before you want to come home." Frenchie says to her, "Well, I'm going to feed him lunch. Maybe 3, 4 o'clock, you come pick him up." All right. So it turns out his real name was R.M. Delgado. Frenchie says to my mother, "I'll feed him lunch. Don't worry about it. We'll call you later." My mother leaves, and we go back into his backyard, which I has only just seen for the first time a couple minutes ago with my mother. And it's not a giant property. It was just a regular little residential property for Hollywood area. But the entire backyard was a jungle. It was shade houses, or hand-built houses of lath. And there was a kidney-shaped pool, a small one. And there was almost nowhere to walk. So first he starts by saying, "Now look, there's some rules." He says, "You don't run around in here. You can't act like a dumb kid." I said, "I don't do that, sir. I'm very respectful. My parents taught me to have respect." And he says, "I'm going to tell you the plant names, and I will tell you what they are 3 times if you ask me. And the 4th time you have to write it down, because I'm never going to repeat it the 4th time." So I said, "Okay, yes, sir." And I had a piece of paper and a pen in case I wanted to write things down. But he takes me to the back of the yard, and he says, "The first thing we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to split up a clump of bromeliads, Neregelias, and how to pot them." And he says, "I'm going to have you pot up a bunch of plants and see how you do, and then we'll have lunch." So I had already learned a lot about bromeliads on my own from the books. But he had about 25 different kinds of Neregelias, all species, Spectabilis, Marmorata, etc., Cruenta. Anyways, they all had 3 or 4 pups in them, mature pups. And he said, "So just do the best you can. Here's the potting mix, and you He showed me how he likes to pot them. And there was rooting compound. He says, don't breathe this dust. And he said, do what you can, and I'll come back and check on you. I said, yes, sir. So I started taking the plants and splitting them up. And, well, I potted up, 100 plants in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So he comes back out, brings me some lemonade at around, I think it was around 10:30, and they're all done. By size, with the right species, and the flats. Professional nursery look. And he looks at me with his mouth open and goes, who the hell are you? And I said, well, sir, I am interested in this, working in nurseries and having my own nursery eventually. I said, I take this stuff very seriously. He goes, you sure do. So anyways, we walk around the backyard, and he's pulling off pups and handing them to me and saying names, and I'm writing down some of them, and we take those to the back. And at a certain point, his wife opens the back door and says, come in for lunch. So we go in, and they had made this beautiful pasta primavera, pasta with vegetables and garlic, butter, white wine sauce. And he opens a bottle of Merlot. I had never had Merlot. He says, you can only have 3 ounces, and you have to drink water. But so it was amazing. The first, I had other kinds of wine, at the New Year's time stuff, but only a couple sips. Anyways, we finished the lunch and went back outside. He showing me how to pollinate plants, how to make hybrids, and telling me names of all these other kinds of plants, ripsalises and begonias and gesneriads, and he had this unbelievable collection. So at the end of this, I call at 3 o'clock. My mother comes at 4 o'clock, and he goes out before me. I'm cleaning up some stuff I had been potting for him, and I go out front. And my mother's in, he's got 3 boxes lined up with a bunch of mature pups and about 10 potted plants. I don't know, must have been 50 different species of bromeliads. And he goes, you're a good kid, I like you. This is to begin your collection. He says, call me anytime, day ahead, and you can come over to visit. Same deal. If you want to pot some plants, I'll give you some plants. And that was the beginning of this incredible friendship. I was 11, he was 64, but he became my best friend. And he taught me almost everything I know about bromeliads. All right, telescope out. I come back from college around 1984, 1985, and Frenchie's wife had died. She had emphysema. They were very heavy smokers. She had died. He was very depressed. I don't blame him. He's in his early 80s by then, or late 70s, not in good health. And he said, listen, I gave you the plants. I gave you the love of the plants. You have to figure out how to pass it on. Now, I forgot to say that, during this period when I had met him as a kid, he had taught me and taken me to the local bromeliad societies. There was one in Culver City, was the main one we went to, and that was called the La Bayona Valley Bromeliad Society, which he founded. And he never told me anything about his background with bromeliads. I had to wait until he died to find out from other people like Bill Palin and Martha Matthias. What it turns out is that Frenchie had been the undocumented 12th or 13th founding father of the Bromeliad Society International. And he had helped found the entire Bromeliad Society in 1951. And then within a year or two of that, he saw he didn't like the politics and the sort of the backstabbing nature of the group. And so he opted out. And he's not documented anywhere. And my few photos of him got burned up in a fire. at my house later on. So I don't have any photo to show you of Frenchie. But he was the progenitor, the beginning person of all of Southern California sorry, had an interruption. Beginning person of California, Southern California, to start the popularity of bromeliads in a large way. So anyways, now comes to the, I had a nursery. I started a nursery in 1990 in Rainbow, California, which is North San Diego County. And I was not growing bromeliads. I grew bromeliads for pleasure. It was a very commercial nursery. I did landscaping. And one of the side projects was something I called living lettuce and living herbs. And these were carry-along baskets of live hybrid lettuce and herbs. And I was in 50 stores before I knew it. And I worked myself to death. Too long a story. Anyways, so it comes to, I had to sell the nursery at a certain point. I was back in Los Angeles in 2005. And I had heard about this startup called Facebook. I didn't give it much credence. I'd never been one to join almost anything. The only thing I ever joined was the Boy Scouts, the Bromeliad Society, and the Orchid Society. That's it. Not really a joiner. But, and I went to Facebook around 2007 and looked at what was going on and said, this is crap. It's people showing their sexy girlfriends or their Ferraris or their supposed giant houses, whatever, trying to push Jesus on you, whatever. None of it made any sense to me. So, I was thinking about it, and a friend said, well, why don't you post something about science? You're into science, you're into plants. Maybe you can post something about that, see if anybody responds. So I did it a few times, and I got no response. But then I was looking around on the initial homepage, and I saw this thing that says, group. Start group or build a group. And I clicked that button, and it takes you to a separate page, and, give the group a title, add a few members, set up, follow these rules. They didn't have actual rules back then, but they had what they called back then were called the friendship rules. So you had to act friendly to people. Anyways, I thought to myself, well, what the heck? I had had this dream as a kid of walking on a very small planet covered in bromeliads. Beep, 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 beep. Like that, walking on the surface of a little planetoid. So I thought, okay, I'll call this group Planet Bromeliads. Planet Bromeliads, sorry, singular. And once I set that up, I went ahead and I invited a few of the people from the Culver City group. A couple of them showed up. A few other people showed up. Back then, you could make a lot of friends. You could make 50 friends a day, Facebook friends, and, up to 5,000. So I friended whoever I could. And back then, the algorithm was much more generous. And as word got out about Planet Bromeliad, people just started joining. And by the end of 2011, I had like 1,000 people in the group. And shortly after I started Planet Bromeliad, I thought to myself, well, I'd better do Planet Tillandsia for the people who only want to talk about Tillandsias. And you got to have a Planet Orchid, and you got to have a Planet Cactus. Well, between the end of 2010 and the end of 2011, I built like 300 planets. I'm not exaggerating. For every kind of plant you can think of. But I only heavily promoted certain ones that were my favorites. Nonetheless, people started joining. And just so you can see, I don't know if you can see this. There's Planet Bromeliad. I can't tell if the camera's picking it up. Well, anyways, you can find it. Just search Planet Bromeliad or Planet Tillandsia on Facebook. any plant name, just put planet in front of it, and it should come up. Those are me. And in the ensuing years, I had real problems with Facebook, not of my own creation. And they kicked me off, and I had to come back on by writing a legal letter. But anyways, I now run about 150 of my planet groups with my co-admin, trusty co-admin, whose online digital name is Bob Cubes. Very nice gentleman, independent actor from Singapore. And we have about 1.1 million members on 150 planets. 200 planets were taken by other people. I don't care. And right now, Planet Bromeliad has about 28,000 members, and Planet Landau has about 29,700. So this creation of the planets was my way of doing what Frenchie had asked me to do. Frenchie said, you gotta promote the plants. You gotta pass on the love any way you can. And so as soon as I saw there was this digital world, this digital space to promote the plants, I did. And it's gone extremely well. I don't make a penny. I've put in over 26,000 hours promoting bromeliads and tillandsias, as well as other plants. Mostly because what? You know, if we don't reach out to young people as plant collectors, this is important. As bromeliad collectors, you know, your collections are not just for you. The plants are going to outlive you. I mean by decades. I bought many plants from the surviving spouse of plant collectors that passed away. You need to think about, what are you going to do with your collection? I don't care if you're 25 years old. You know, you need to reach out to your neighbors, to your nephew, to your kids, whoever, to a local plant club. And you need to get them interested in bromeliads. Even if you give away some free pups. That's what Frenchie did. He'd always give people free plants. And then if they wanted a mature large plant, he would charge for it. But we need to be more socially conscious in the bromeliad world. Now, I realize that many of the tillandsia hybrids are very expensive, and that there's a need to have security for your collection, and I understand that. It doesn't mean anyone needs to know where you live, but you need to reach out through your local plant societies or through your social contacts and get people interested in these plants, because I'll tell you why. What's happening is, between habitat destruction for growing soya and growing soybeans and other stuff and beef cattle in South America, you know, 1/2 the Amazon is gone. And it's even worse in the Central American areas, Guatemala, Ecuador, etc. Well, not Ecuador, Guatemala, Costa Rica. The point is, between climate change and habitat destruction, the majority of bromeliads are actually threatened. Because remember, they're native to, they're endemic only to Central and South America. They don't grow anywhere else in the world. There's one species of pitcairnea that grows in Africa, but that's the extraordinary case. So, for those of you who collect bromeliads, it's important. Please keep species in your collections. The hybrids are fun, but it's so important for us to keep the species going as collectors. And please take time to promote the plants, either to a local grade school or a local high school, a junior college. You can talk to the botany department. Get creative. It's important that these plants survive. You know, to me, and the words was to Frenchie, and I think to many of you if you're collectors. And like I say, even if you're young, think about the future of what you're going to happen to your collection. So, you know, the reason we grow these plants is they're the most spectacular plants on Earth. I love orchids, and orchids are showy and fantastic, and I'm not putting them down. But growing bromeliads is so much easier. It's crazy. You can't even compare the two. you know, bromeliads, basically, if you water them once or twice a month, almost all of them, and you put them in the right spot in your garden, that's it. They're going to grow forever. So, you know, between the shapes and the colors, the forms, the sizes, you know, they're the most incredible family of plants with the most varied forms and interesting aspects to their life cycles. And, you know, most people now are into tillandsias, which, you know, the common name is air plants. And these have garnered an incredible following around the planet. They're everywhere now. I mean, we have people on Planet Tillandsia, which is my Facebook group, from Russia, from India, from Africa, from Columbus, Ohio, you name it. These plants are popular everywhere, but we need to preserve their habitats. We need to make sure the species survive, both in the wild and in our collections. It's too important not to think ahead. All right, there's a little take on why I love bromeliads and where I learned about them and why I do what I do. So thank you, and you people take care of yourselves, and you can always find me on Facebook. Bye-bye.